Let me ask you something. You drill a hole, your sonar screen lights up showing a 10-foot drop-off, and you think, I've hit the jackpot, the winter Bream mother lode. But what if I told you that 9 times out of 10, that perfect hole is a complete and total waste of your time? Today, we're talking about the biggest myth in winter bream fishing, the critical difference between a random deep hole and a true fish-holding wintering spot. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why your buddy is pulling fish out one after another just 50 yards away while you're staring at a blank screen. I promise what you're about to hear will change how you approach the ice. Think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments right now if you believe any deep hole is a good hole. For generations, the advice passed down from our grandfathers has been incredibly simple. In winter, fish go deep. It's the first rule we all learn. The water is more stable down there, slightly warmer, and it offers protection from the harsh conditions on the surface. So what did we do? We all got our lake maps, our augers, and our fancy new electronics, and we started a frantic search for the deepest spots on any given body of water. It's logical, it makes sense on the surface, and it's what everyone else is doing. But that's precisely the problem. Following that one simple rule without understanding the why behind it is the reason so many anglers spend entire days freezing their tails off for absolutely nothing. They are fishing based on a correct theory, but they are applying it in the completely wrong locations. First, let's talk about the deep hole illusion. Picture it. You're out on a vast, frozen flat. You look at your map and see a small, isolated circle indicating a 20-foot hole in an area that's otherwise only 10 feet deep. The excitement builds. This has to be it, right? It's the only significant depth change for hundreds of yards. It's a natural magnet for fish. You drill your hole, your flasher confirms the depth, and you settle in, absolutely convinced that you're about to have the day of a lifetime. You're patient. You wait and wait. This is a powerful psychological trap. The visual evidence on the map is so compelling that it overrides our logic. We become convinced that fish must be there, and if they aren't biting, it's because of the bait, the time of day, or the barometric pressure. We refuse to believe the spot itself is a dud. This illusion is the #1 reason for empty buckets in winter. So if it's not just about depth, what does a fish really need in the winter? We have to think like a bream, and its needs are primal. They can be boiled down to 3 essential pillars: security, stable oxygen, and a readily available food source that requires minimal effort to find. A deep hole might offer security from predators. That's true. But it often fails on the other 2 counts. A bream's entire winter existence is about conserving energy. Its metabolism has slowed to a crawl. It is not going to sit in a safe spot if it has to make a long commute every day to find food or better oxygen. A location must offer all 3 of these pillars in very close proximity. The perfect wintering spot is a self-contained ecosystem where a fish can survive for months without ever having to travel more than a few feet. If any one of those 3 pillars is missing, the fish will not be there. It's that simple. Now let's bust a huge myth, the oxygen myth. We assume that because water is deeper, it must be better. But that's not always true, especially later in the winter, when ice is thick and snow cover is heavy, blocking sunlight. This prevents aquatic plants from producing oxygen. Meanwhile, all the dead leaves, weeds, and organic gunk at the bottom of the lake are decaying, a process that actively consumes oxygen. In a deep, stagnant hole with little to no water circulation, the very bottom can become anoxic, meaning it has dangerously low oxygen levels. Fish can't survive there. They may be just a few feet above it, or they may avoid the hole altogether. So while you're fishing the deepest point, thinking you're in the prime real estate, the fish are actually suspended 10 feet off the bottom or have moved to a shallower area with better water quality. The deepest water is not always the most life-sustaining water. This leads to our next point. A hole can absolutely be too deep. This ties directly into that oxygen problem. That anoxic zone I mentioned is a real, measurable thing. Have you ever drilled a hole and gotten a whiff of a foul, sulfur, rotten egg smell? That is a 5-alarm fire drill. That is the smell of anaerobic decomposition, a clear sign that the water at the bottom has no oxygen. You should pack up immediately. That spot is a fish graveyard, not a fish hotel. The deepest point of these isolated holes often acts as a collection basin for all the decaying organic matter in the area. It turns into a toxic stew that consumes oxygen, and no self-respecting bream will hang out there for long. So the very feature you targeted as a fish magnet is, in fact, a fish repellent. The fish are smarter than we are. They know to avoid these dead zones. We're the ones who keep drilling holes in them. Okay, so what about the food? Let's talk about a Bream's winter grocery store. They're primarily feeding on small invertebrates, bloodworms, and other tiny organisms living in the lake's bottom. Now, where do these critters live? They aren't typically found in the deepest, silty, oxygen-deprived parts of the lake. They thrive in softer mud and sediment, often on the gentle slopes, benches, or flats adjacent to the deep water, where there's a better balance of oxygen and organic material. So, a bream might use the deep hole for security, but it has to leave that spot to go to the kitchen. And remember, they are lazy. They don't want a long commute. A deep hole with no nearby feeding flats is an empty house. The fish will choose a slightly shallower spot that has a pantry full of food right next to the living room. This is where understanding bottom composition becomes a game changer. Your electronics can tell you more than just the depth. Pay attention to the return signal on your sonar. A thin, sharp red line usually indicates a hard bottom like rock, gravel, or packed sand. A wider, softer, or even multicolored band indicates a soft bottom like mud or silt. Bream and the insects they feed on vastly prefer that softer bottom. You can find a 30-foot hole, but if your sonar shows it has a hard, rocky bottom, you should be extremely skeptical. It's likely barren. The sweet spot is a deep area that features a wide, soft bottom return. That's the dinner plate. When you find depth combined with the right bottom type, you've found 2 of the 3 critical pillars. You are getting much, much warmer. So it's time to redefine what we're looking for. I want you to erase the phrase deep hole from your vocabulary. From now on, we're looking for a wintering pit or a basin. This isn't just about semantics, it's about changing the entire scale of your search. A hole is a small, isolated feature, a pothole in the road. A pit or a basin is a much larger, more significant depression in the lake floor. It's a valley, not a pothole. It might cover an area the size of a football field or even larger. This is a feature substantial enough to house an entire community of fish for the winter, not just a handful of stragglers. When you start thinking in terms of these large-scale basins instead of tiny holes, you begin to understand the kind of structure that can truly hold a mother lode. Let's expand on that. A true wintering pit isn't just a spot, it's a neighborhood. Think about it. An entire school of large bream doesn't cram itself into a space the size of your living room. A genuine wintering location holds a massive population of fish, and they use the entire feature. They will move around the basin from the deepest point to the shallower slopes and edges depending on the time of day, feeding opportunities and water conditions. Your job is not to find one single magical spot. Your job is to find the right neighborhood. Once you know you're in the right area, you can then drill a pattern of holes to find where the fish are concentrating on that particular day. But you have to find the neighborhood first. Stop looking for one house. Start looking for the whole subdivision. And how do fish find these neighborhoods? They don't just magically appear there when the first ice forms, they follow underwater highways. In most lakes and reservoirs, these highways are old, submerged creek and river channels. Get a good contour map and learn to identify them. They look like winding, snake-like lines of deeper water cutting across the lake bottom. These channels act as natural funnels, guiding fish from their summer and fall locations directly to the major wintering basins. The absolute best wintering pits are almost always connected to one of these old channels. An isolated basin is good, a basin that a creek channel runs directly into. That's the jackpot. You've found the intersection of the highway and the city. Now let's add another layer. Structure near the hole. An empty mud basin can be good, but a basin with extra features is even better. What else is around? Look at your map. Is there a sharp inside turn in the creek channel right where it enters the basin? Is there a submerged rock pile on one of the slopes? A decaying fallen tree on the edge? An old weed line that dies off right at the drop-off? All of these things are structural elements that provide additional security, ambush points, and navigational aids for fish. An empty desert might hold life, but an oasis with trees and rocks will hold much more. These extra bits of structure make an already good area a 5-star resort for winter bream. They turn a good spot into a great one that will hold fish year after year. Let's create a clear visual example. Imagine you're looking at 2 spots on your lake map. Spot A is a perfectly round, symmetrical 30-foot deep bowl in the middle of a 15-foot flat. It's isolated. Spot B is also 30 feet deep, but it's shaped more like a long, asymmetrical trench. You can see on the map that this trench is part of a longer, winding creek channel. Which spot do you fish? 99 times out of 100, you go to spot B. The trench is the far better bet. Its shape tells you that it's part of a much larger dynamic system. It's a travel route and a destination. Spot A, the perfect bowl, is more likely to be a stagnant, isolated geological anomaly with poor oxygen and no connection to the fish's migration routes. Don't be fooled by its perfect appearance on the map. We have to remember the bream's lazy winter mentality. In cold water, their metabolism slows down dramatically. Every single movement they make, every flick of a fin, costs them precious energy reserves they need to survive until spring. They are not in a hunting or aggressive mood. They are in pure survival mode. Their entire world shrinks to finding a location where they can sit as still as possible, feel completely safe from predators, and have a food source that is either right in front of their face or just a very short, slow swim away. A perfect wintering pit is designed to accommodate this extremely lazy, energy-conserving lifestyle. If a spot requires them to travel or expend any significant energy, they simply won't use it. You have to find their couch, their living room. Here's a factor most ice anglers completely ignore: current. Even in what we think of as a still lake or reservoir, there can be subtle, slow-moving underwater currents. These are especially common in systems that are fed by rivers or have a dam at one end. This slight movement of water is incredibly important. It brings a constant, fresh supply of oxygen into the deep basins and can also drift tiny food particles along the bottom. A wintering pit with even a tiny, almost imperceptible amount of flow will be far more vibrant and life-sustaining than a completely stagnant one. It's like having a fan on in a stuffy room. That little bit of circulation makes a world of difference for the health of the entire aquatic community, and the fish know it. So, how do we put all this together on the ice? This is where you need to use your electronics as more than just a depth finder. First, when you drill a hole, pay attention to the bottom return. Are you seeing that wide, soft band that indicates mud? Good. Next, don't just stare at the bottom 3 feet of the water column. Scan the entire thing. Do you see clouds of suspended baitfish? That's a massive clue. The presence of bait tells you the area has enough oxygen and food to support life. Most importantly, are you marking any fish? A true wintering pit is a city. If you drill 10 or 15 holes across a promising area and your screen is consistently blank, you're not in the right neighborhood yet. Don't be afraid to trust your electronics when they tell you no one is home. This is so important, it's worth repeating. You have to look for signs of life, not just for depth. A deep, sterile hole is one of the most common traps in all of fishing. The presence of baitfish is probably the single most important clue you can find. If the shiners, the small perch, or other minnows are using an area, you can be certain that the bigger fish you're targeting are not far away. They follow their food source. Conversely, if you find a deep basin that is completely devoid of any life, no bait, no marks, nothing, you should be highly suspicious. It might look perfect on the map, but for some reason, likely poor oxygen or a lack of food, the fish have voted with their fins and decided to live somewhere else. Trust what the ecosystem is telling you. I'll tell you a quick story about the day this all clicked for me. I spent 6 hours on a perfect 40-foot hole that I had been staring at on a map all year. It was a classic bowl, and I was so sure it was the spot. I caught nothing, not a single bite. I was cold, frustrated, and ready to go home. In a last-ditch effort, I looked at my map again and noticed a subtle finger, an old channel that touched the edge of this big hole about 75 yards away. I packed up, moved over there, and drilled a hole right on the lip where the channel met the basin. My flasher lit up like a Christmas tree. The fish weren't in the bottom of the hole, they were stacked up on the edge of the highway leading into it. That one move changed my entire understanding of winter location. This brings us to a huge strategic mistake many anglers make: spot hopping on deep holes. Here's what that looks like. You go to one isolated deep hole, drill a few holes, and if you don't get a bite in 30 minutes, you pack everything up and drive your machine a mile across the lake to the next isolated deep hole. You're fishing spots, not areas. The correct approach is to identify a large, high-percentage area, like a major basin connected to a creek channel, and then commit to breaking it down. You drill a grid of holes, you explore the deep center, the shallower edges, the connecting points, the nearby structure. You're not looking for one magic spot. You're systematically searching a high-potential neighborhood until you find where the residents are hanging out that day. The best part is you can do most of this work before you even leave your house. This is called e-scouting, and it is the secret weapon of successful ice anglers. Get a good digital mapping service like Navionics or a similar app and spend time studying the lakes you plan to fish. Don't just look for the darkest blue spots on the map. Trace the paths of the old river and creek channels. Look for where they make sharp turns or dump into large sprawling basins and flats. Find the intersections. Mark these high-percentage areas on your GPS. When you get to the lake, you won't be guessing. You'll have a game plan with 5 or 6 high-potential neighborhoods to investigate, instead of just a list of random deep holes. And one last critical tip when you're exploring these basins: don't get too focused on the absolute deepest point. Remember the edge effect. Very often, the most active feeding fish will not be sitting in the mud at the very bottom of the pit. They will be relating to the break lines, the edges where the deep basin begins to slope up to the surrounding flats. And this is a natural transition zone. It provides security from the deep water right next to the feeding opportunities on the slope. Fishing right on the lip of the bowl or on the first major drop-off is often far more productive than dropping your lure into the center of the abyss. The edge is where the action happens. So let's tie it all together with a simple mental checklist. The next time you're looking for a winter bream spot, ask yourself these 4 questions. 1. Is this a large, significant basin, not just a small, isolated hole? 2. Is it connected to a natural travel route like a creek channel or major piece of structure? 3. Does the bottom composition appear to be soft and food-rich, not hard rock? And 4. Are there any signs of life, especially baitfish, in the area? If you can't confidently check at least 3 of those 4 boxes, it's time to move on. Stop letting those deceptive, isolated, deep holes trap you into wasting your valuable time on the ice. The fish are telling you where they live. You just have to learn to speak their language. So, the big takeaway is this. Stop chasing depth for depth's sake. That isolated, perfectly round 20-foot hole in the middle of a flat is probably a biological desert. It's a trap, plain and simple. The real wintering grounds, the places that hold massive schools of fish, are large, complex systems. They are sprawling basins and depressions connected to old river channels with the right kind of soft, food-producing bottom and nearby structure. The real aha moment, the thing that I hope sticks with you, is realizing that the fish aren't just in the hole, they're using the entire area around it. The deep water is just their living room for security, but they still need a kitchen and a hallway. For years, most of us have been trying to catch them while they're sleeping in the back bedroom, when the party is actually happening all over the rest of the house. I really hope this changes how you look at a frozen lake from now on. Thanks so much for sticking with me. If this blew your mind a little, or even just confirmed something you suspected, do me a favor and hit that like button. And for more tips that go against the grain, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now I want to hear from you. What's the biggest fishing rule you eventually learned to break? Let's get a good discussion going in the comments below. Stay safe out there and tight lines.